Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of uh, Geopolitics, Geostrategy with AbhijitChavda. I hope you're all doing very well. Today is a fresh week, so we're gonna do a global intelligence briefing. We're gonna take a look at all the important, critical developments that have happened over the past week. We're gonna look at the important storylines that are evolving that we need to look at in this current coming week, and we're also going to take a look at the predictions that I had made last week. And let's take a look at what happened to those predictions. Did they fare well? Did they fare disastrously? We're going to take a look at that as well. And before we begin, let me just remind you that this is not a Q&A show. If you have questions, I will be happy to take them in the Ask Abhijit show that begins immediately once this live stream ends. So with that said, without further ado, let us begin today's episode, and let us begin the intelligence briefing. So here we have it, the weekly intelligence briefing for this week. And what do we have in this? So we're going to start with the top uh, 10 most impactful developments that have happened in the past week. So we're going to quickly take a roundup of the important things that have happened in the past week, and then we're going to do a forward looking thing. So, three of the most important developments have been Russia's massive retaliation. So, we know that last week we had the Operation Spiderweb that Ukraine conducted, massive, unprecedented attacks on Russian infrastructure, military infrastructure. And following this, Russia has launched one of its most massive aerial assaults, which has targeted multiple Ukrainian cities with hundreds of drones and missiles. Then we're going to talk about the Iran nuclear standoff, and then we're going to talk about NATO's 5% of GDP target. So let's go and look at development number one. So Russia has launched massive retaliatory strikes on Ukraine. Um, it has targeted multiple Ukrainian cities with hundreds of drones, hundreds of missiles, and the strategic significance of this is that it shows Russia's determination to maintain escalation, dominance, and it shows Russia's determination to punish Ukraine for its deep strikes into Russian territory and its destruction of multiple Russian strategic aircraft. And at the same time, apart from launching these drone strikes and missile strikes with hundreds of assets, Russia has simultaneously advanced into the Dnipropetrovsk region for the first time. So this has created a two-front pressure campaign. So this is the new territorial push by Russia, and there's also other developments on the Sumy front and so on. So this is one of the most important and critical things that has happened in the past week, and it's an ongoing situation. What else do we have? We have the US-Iran nuclear standoff, and this is in the process of escalating. So the International Atomic Energy Association has revealed that Iran conducted concealed implosion tests critical for nuclear weapons in 2003. So it has chosen to reveal this today, 22 plus years after it happened. So this revelation has come out now. Now Iran is now believed to have accumulated over 400 kilograms of uranium enriched to at least 60%, which is said to be enough for nearly 10 nuclear weapons. And Iran has rejected American proposals for both limited uranium enrichment and a total enrichment ban. And Israel, at the same time, conducted strikes on Hezbollah drone facilities, while Iran-backed Houthi rebels, like they say, Houthi rebels, they launched missiles at Tel Aviv's airport. So this situation is escalating. The situation vis-a-vis Israel and Hezbollah, Israel, Gaza, and the Houthis and Israel, that is unfolding simultaneously with the Iran nuclear standoff, and this is all interconnected. So this once again is one of the top developments in the past week, and it is an ongoing development. So it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on even in the coming week. Next, NATO allies have endorsed 5% defense spending target. So thus far, the NATO allies, what does it mean to be a NATO ally? It means that you are a US vassal. NATO allies are the non-US NATO nations. So thus far, NATO allies, they typically had to spend less than 2% of their GDP on defense. And what it means is that they had to contribute less than 2% of their GDP to NATO's budget. Now, under pressure from the Trump administration, they have agreed. It looks like they have realigned their position, and they are now okay with spending about 5% of their GDP and contributing that to the NATO budget. So this is the most significant shift in NATO in decades. So, like I said, the current benchmark is around 2%. So this is way above the current 2% benchmark. So this tells you that NATO seems to be seeing big threats on its horizon, and obviously the threat can only be Russia, because there's no other threat in Europe from the NATO perspective. Now, there's military expansion that's going to come with this. So Germany plans to increase its troop strength by about 60,000 troop increase. And all of this is as a response to what NATO calls the Russian threat. It's a direct response to the ongoing Ukraine conflict. So that's about NATO. Now we have a very interesting development. The very public, very juvenile Donald Trump, Elon Musk feud. This very public fight that these two gentlemen are having. Now, this fight is threatening US space infrastructure. So how did it all begin? So it began with Musk moving out of the Trump cabinet, moving out of the White House. And as soon as that happened, Elon Musk, he called Trump's bill, one of the latest bills, a disgusting abomination. And the moment this happened, Trump responded and he threatened to cancel government contracts with SpaceX and Tesla. And as a consequence of this, Tesla lost about between 152 to 380 billion dollars in market value. That is a tremendous loss, right? Just because of a statement by Donald Trump, by the president of the United States. And in response to this, Elon Musk threatened to immediately decommission SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft, which is essential, which is vital, which is critical for transportation of crew members to and from the International Space Station. So before the Dragon spacecraft was commissioned, for more than a decade, if I'm not mistaken, the crew of the International Space Station had to rely on Russian Soyuz spacecraft for traveling to the International Space Station and returning back to the Earth. Now, because of this new spacecraft that was developed by SpaceX, the Americans no longer have to depend on the Russians. Now, because of this feud, this very public, very juvenile feud between two individuals, it looks like the United States may lose this very vital, very critical asset of theirs. So this is a very surprising situation. Maybe not that surprising, but very completely unnecessary and pointless situation from the American perspective. And this is once again an ongoing situation. Then we have a situation in the Indo-Pacific region, like they call it. So the United Kingdom has committed now to purchasing or building 12 new AUKUS nuclear submarines. AUKUS is this alliance, coalition, whatever you want to call it, between the Australians, the UK, and the United States. So this is a major fleet expansion. The UK has announced plans to build 12 SSN AUKUS nuclear-powered attack submarines, which is a significant long-term security commitment to the Indo-Pacific region. The geopolitical significance of this is that this represents a major commitment to the Indo-Pacific and a direct response to China's growing naval power. And this is a trilateral security measure. This move solidifies UK, US, Australia security architecture aimed at maintaining a military edge in a very important, very critical global theater, which is the Indo-Pacific region. So the US has always relied on its closest vassals, so to say, which is the English-speaking nations, the Anglosphere. So the Anglosphere is the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And these are also the Five Eyes nations. So these are the closest allies for the US. And out of these, I mean, Canada is not that geopolitically significant. Neither is New Zealand. So the top three, you would say, are the UK, the US, and Australia. I would say the US first, then maybe Australia and the US. So the US gets these two other nations also to foot the bill for doing things and all, and distributes its assets among these nations. The majority of the assets remain with the US, and then you have assets that the UK owns and assets that the Australians own. So this is the expanding scope of the AUKUS coalition that we are witnessing over here. What else? What next do we have? So we have developments between Russia and North Korea. So Russia and North Korea have formalized a military alliance. So North Korea has pledged unconditional support for Russia's war in Ukraine, the special military operation that's ongoing since February 2022. We are aware since of late that about 11,000 North Korean troops are deployed in Russia as of now, and about 100 ballistic missiles have been provided by North Korea to Russia. And this is further proof that the Ukraine conflict is becoming more and more internationalized. We obviously have Russia, which is involved, and Ukraine, which is involved. Ukraine is backed by all the NATO nations and all the EU nations. So it's a very large coalition of nations that's standing behind Ukraine. Ukraine is receiving weapons, arms, and all ammunition and advisors, etc., technicians, perhaps allegedly from the West, from a variety of EU and NATO nations. And Russia has been purchasing drones, kamikaze drones, the Shahid 2 drones from Iran. It's been given various kinds of ammunition and supplies by North Korea. Now we have 11,000 North Korean troops who are fighting in Ukraine on behalf of Russia. So we are seeing this growing internationalization of this Ukraine conflict on the side of Russia as well now. So this is once again an ongoing situation, and of course China is very much involved from behind the scenes. Now, this is an interesting one. The US has sanctioned International Criminal Court judges, the ICC judges. This is kind of an unprecedented action. The US has always had this animosity towards the International Criminal Court, but now the US has imposed sanctions on 4 International Criminal Court judges involved in investigations targeting the US and Israel. So we know that the US has a very special relationship with Israel. The US offers and provides unconditional support to Israel. So when you have International Criminal Court investigations targeting Israel, the Americans will not be pleased about that. And when you have ICC investigations targeting the US, well, once again, the US will not be pleased about that. So the US has imposed sanctions on 4 of these judges, and this action blocks their US assets and restricts these individuals' travel. And this has created a significant diplomatic crisis. And the European Union has publicly expressed strong support for the ICC, and it has condemned the American action. So this has created a significant public rift with America's key European allies who are staunch supporters of the ICC. And this is something that we cannot attribute to the Trump administration alone. Even the Biden administration has had this approach towards the ICC. So the US has a pretty bipartisan view on this matter when it comes to the ICC. Now, the broader context is that these sanctions are a response to ICC investigations into alleged war crimes by American troops, apparently in Afghanistan, and alleged war crimes by Israel. And this move aligns with other assertive US actions, including travel bans and tariffs on China and so on. So, overall, the US is being super assertive and super aggressive internationally. And this seems to be a continuation of that trend. Now, let's move on to Africa. So, we know that the Russians have had this outfit called the Wagner group, which is or was a paramilitary outfit. Now, the Russians have replaced the Wagner group with what they call the Africa Corps in Mali. So this is an official replacement. Russia has officially replaced the Wagner group with its Africa core. So this signals a formalization of Russia's military presence in West Africa. As long as the Wagner group was operational in various parts of Africa, this could be dismissed as, not direct Russian state involvement, because this was technically a private organization. But the Africa Corps is definitely 100% Russian state. It's a Russian state asset. So this formalizes the Russian military presence. State military presence in West Africa, and this is going to probably serve as the template for expanding Russia's military operations to other Sahel countries. And this kind of goes hand in hand with what we discussed last week, which is that the US has now declared that the Sahel region is the global epicenter for terrorism, apparently displacing Pakistan. And continuing with Africa, there is a humanitarian crisis right now going on in Sudan. In case anyone doesn't know, most people won't know about this. There's a tremendous civil war going on in Sudan as we speak, and this has created a massive refugee crisis. More than 4 million refugees have fled Sudan, and this is in the process of creating one of the world's largest displacement crises. There is this ongoing war, this fighting going on between the Sudanese military and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF), and this fighting has intensified. And the civilians have been caught in the crossfire for weeks, for months on end. I have been tracking this. The media doesn't report this, but that's what we have. And this is a worsening humanitarian crisis, because both these factions, both these warring parties, they are deliberately targeting aid operations that are designed to offer some kind of respite to the civilians. So these civilians, more than 4 million of them, have zero access to any kind of humanitarian aid, and this obviously is a tremendous crisis, and it's in the process of getting worse. So this is on the east coast of Africa, Sudan, east coast to the eastern part of Africa, that region. And then let us discuss the US-China trade war, tariff war. What's going on there? There's an ongoing trade war, there's an ongoing tariff war, there's an ongoing technology war between the US and China. It's about resources, it's about so much more. So the latest development is that the US and China have agreed to resume high-level trade talks. So the two presidents, Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi, they held their first direct call since January. And Mr. Trump described this call as very good. And now the impact of this is that high-level delegations from the US and China will meet in London on the 9th of June, which happens to be today, for a new economic and trade consultation mechanism. So they're going to hold talks to hopefully, from their perspective, arrive at some kind of new economic and trade consultation mechanism. And as a gesture of goodwill, China has approved some rare earth export licenses for US and EU firms, as something that will smooth the process a little bit, right? And these talks, they follow the OECD slashing global growth forecasts due to the trade war. So there's economic pressure, and both nations seem to feel that we need to get something going here. So these have been the most important, most critical, most crucial developments, geopolitical, geostrategic developments in the past week, and that these things are affecting what the world is like right now, and what we're going to see in the coming weeks and months. Now, with this said, let us talk about last week's predictions that I made. I made a set of 4 predictions. So the question is, what happened to these predictions? Look, what we're going to do in this show going forward, this show will evolve as it goes forward, Geostrategy. But what we will do is that we're going to have alternating weeks. One week we're going to have a set of predictions or forecasts, and the next week we're going to have an assessment of how the predictions went. And then once again we do predictions, and then once again we do forecasts. So alternating weeks we have predictions, and then we have assessments. So let's do a hard evaluation of the accuracy of my previous forecasts from last week against what has actually developed in the past 7 days. So this is hopefully something that provides transparency and accountability in my analytical process. So let's take a look at the first prediction that I had made. My first prediction was that the Russia Ukraine conflict will intensify. That's the prediction that I had made, and I had given three scenarios. Scenario one was that there would be an escalatory stalemate, and I had said that there was a 70% roughly probability of this happening. And the scenario is that Ukraine utilizes its newly unrestricted Western long-range weapons for significant strikes on Russian military industrial targets, and Russia, I said, would respond with intensified missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities. The second scenario B that I gave, was a frozen conflict. I said it has a low likelihood, 20%, and this is described as having low intensity warfare with limited territorial changes and reduced strategic strikes. And the lowest probability scenario with 10% probability, I said, was scenario C, which is the diplomatic breakthrough, which is unexpected progress in negotiations leading to partial de-escalation. So what has happened? I gave three scenarios. What actually has happened? So the outcome, if we look at what has happened in the past 7 days, you will see that the scenario A has materialized almost precisely as forecasted. If you look at everything that's happened, you can say that scenario A has accuracy of 95%. And scenario B has an accuracy of 3%. I had said it would have an accuracy of 20%. It turned out to be 3. And scenario C has an accuracy of 2%. I said it may have an accuracy of 10%. So the scenario A with 70%, it turned out to have an accuracy of 95%. So the last 7 days has witnessed, this period of 7 days has witnessed dramatic escalation in long range strikes. It has seen a dramatic escalation in intensified Russian retaliation. It has seen failed peace negotiations, and it has seen continued military developments. Let's take a look at the details. Right? So here's what's happened. So we know that last week Operation Spiderweb happened. Ukraine launched unprecedented deep strikes against Russian strategic aviation assets across 7,000 kilometers of Russian territory. Right, and this operation these strikes, they continued beyond the June 1 operation. So on June 6, Ukrainian forces conducted additional preemptive strikes against the Engels airbase in Russia's Saratov Oblast. And then the Dyagilevo airfield was hit, which houses air refueling tankers and bomber escort fighters. And this airfield suffered fire damage. So as you can see, the Ukrainian long-range strikes continued beyond Operation Spiderweb. And then you had a Russian retaliatory escalation. So Russia launched 452 drones in one of the largest attacks of the Ukraine war thus far. Russia launched 45 missiles that targeted Ukrainian cities and infrastructure. And the city of Kharkiv bore the brunt of what its mayor called the most powerful assault since 2022, in which it looks like there were 48 different hits on the city. Then we had the failed peace negotiations. So the second round of the direct Russia-Ukraine negotiations since 2022, which happened in Istanbul, this lasted just over an hour and it had minimal progress. So Russia presented punitive terms, which required Ukrainian withdrawal from 4 annexed regions. Both sides agreed to some kind of prisoner exchange involving at least 1,000 people and the return of 6,000 fallen soldiers' remains. And Zelensky's assessment is that the Russians don't see this as a ceasefire as a moment. They just don't see a ceasefire as such at the moment. I think they are idiots. So it's clear that the peace negotiations have failed very badly. Then there were multiple Russian ground offensives. So I had mentioned Sumy last week. So Russian forces continued their offensive operations in the Kursk region and in the Sumy region. Then there is the Donetsk campaign. Russian forces maintained their systematic campaign to capture the entirety of the Donetsk Oblast. Then there are the advances in Liman. So geolocated footage has shown that advances in the Srebrenica forest area and near Zelena Dolnia. So that's ongoing. And the Russian command intends to seize the remainder of Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts prior to September 1, 2025. So the Rasputitsa season begins around that time. So they want to capture the remainder of these oblasts before that time. The Rasputitsa season is the mud season, and that's not a good time to have any kind of offensive military action in the Ukraine region. Now, what's the role of NATO been in the past week or so? A large-scale U.S. Army operation deployed about 25,000 troops across 18 countries. Lithuania launched international field training exercises involving about 8,000 local and allied troops, which is NATO troops. And Germany has deployed about 30 helicopters to Lithuania, including Tigers, CH-53 Sea Stallions, and NH-90s. So that's been the NATO response thus far. Now let's look at the accuracy of the timeline, the temporal accuracy, and let's validate the timeline. So we know that on June 1, Ukraine launched Operation Spiderweb against various Russian strategic assets. On June 2, the next day after this, the Istanbul peace talks happened, but they produced no substantive progress beyond prisoner exchanges. On June 6, Ukraine conducted additional long-range strikes on the Engels air base and the Yagilevo airfield. And June 6 and 7, Russia then launched massive retaliatory strikes with 452 drones and 45 missiles. So, I had also given scenarios B and C. Let's take a look at the non-materialization analysis. So scenario B was a frozen conflict scenario. This scenario clearly has not materialized. We have not witnessed reduced pace deep strikes and stabilized front lines. We have actually witnessed significant escalation in the conflict. And the Operation Spiderweb, which we have discussed, it represented the largest long-range attack of the war. And the Russian retaliation involved some of the heaviest aerial attacks since the war began in 2022. And scenario C was diplomatic breakthrough. Once again, it found no validation. The Istanbul peace talks failed. They demonstrated that both sides remain fundamentally opposed on core issues. They are entrenched with their agendas, and there is nothing in common that they can talk to each other about. And Russia has presented maximalist demands to Ukraine, which essentially require Ukraine to capitulate. And it shows that Moscow has not moderated its war aims, which indicates that it is pretty confident that it will achieve its objectives. So that is about prediction 1 that I had made. It has turned out to be bang on target. Scenario A has turned out to be bang on target. Let's take a look at the second prediction that I had made last week. And this prediction was about the Iran nuclear standoff. The prediction was that this Iran nuclear standoff will reach a critical point. So, and this had, so the second prediction focused on the escalating tensions about Iran's nuclear program. The Americans want Iran to cap it. Iran wants to continue it, or maybe have give some kind of concessions to the US in exchange for lifting of various sanctions and so on. So that's the situation that's unfolding, and the international response to Tehran's advancing enrichment capabilities. That's also what the prediction focused on. So what was scenario A in the prediction? Scenario A, which I gave, said that there would be intensified pressure and brinkmanship from both sides. I said that there would be a 70% prediction, 70% probability of this happening. And I gave a time horizon of about 45 days for this to happen. And I said that these things will happen in this scenario. First of all, there will be condemnation by the IAEA. The IAEA Board of Governors will formally condemn Iran's increased uranium enrichment and the lack of transparency. Secondly, I said that Iran would escalate. It would respond by further accelerating enrichment and limiting IAEA access to its facilities, nuclear facilities. The third thing that would happen, I said, would that there will be a dual track approach. the US and the E3 nations will pursue intensified diplomatic engagement coupled with new targeted sanctions on Iran. And then I said that Israel would be involved. It would conduct high profile military exercises, simulating strikes on key Iranian nuclear facilities. Now let's take a look at what's really happened. What's the outcome been like? The outcome is that scenario A, intensified pressure in brinkmanship, this scenario has been confirmed. This scenario A, is manifesting with very remarkable accuracy. What's the accuracy like? I said it would have a 70% probability. It's accurate up to 85% if you look at all the data points that we have. Scenario B, which I had given, has a 10%. I had said 20%, but it's turned out to have an accuracy of 10%. And the third scenario has an accuracy of 5%. So scenario A is manifesting itself with remarkable accuracy. So let's take a look at what has happened. Okay, what have we found in the what has happened in the past week? So we have found that Iran's nuclear program is advancing. Iran now has 408.6 kilograms of at least 60% enriched uranium. So it has sharply increased its stockpile of uranium enriched to this percentage. The kilogram increase is 133.8 kilograms. This is since the February report, and the current stockpile contains enough material for about 10 nuclear weapons. The Iran retaliatory posture. So here are the statements issued by Iran. Mohammed Islami, the head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, said that the IAEA has lost its credibility by acting under unilateral American influence. It's supposed to be a multilateral and neutral organization, but it's acting under unilateral American influence. And Behruz Kamalwandi, spokesperson for Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, said that last time we warned them and they didn't listen, so we increased to 60% enrichment. We increased 60% enrichment sevenfold now again. So yeah, we can see the brinkmanship from Iran over here. Now there's a dual track Western approach. Like I said, there's a diplomatic track and there's a pressure track. So what's the diplomatic track been like? So the Trump administration has released a new nuclear deal proposal over the weekend for Iran, which would permit Iran to continue low-level uranium enrichment. And Iran plans to officially respond to the US proposal within the next 2 days through Omani facilitation. The pressure track is that the US has issued new Iran-related sanctions on June 6th, targeting 10 individuals and 27 entities. And European powers have prepared to submit a draft resolution to the IAEA Board of Governors, creating potential pathways to trigger snapback sanctions on Iran. Now, what's the Israeli angle over here? So, Israel is actively preparing for a potential military strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, according to new US intelligence assessments. And the newly appointed Israeli Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, has identified 2025 as a potential timeline for a military confrontation with Iran. And Israeli forces conducted joint aerial drills with US and British fighter planes, which included strategic B-52 bombers over the Middle East. So you can see that there is saber rattling over here, and Israel is demonstrating its military readiness and its ability to potentially strike on demand at Iranian nuclear facilities. The other scenarios that I had given, scenario B and scenario C, there is limited evidence that any of these scenarios have come true. Scenario B was temporary de-escalation. There is minimal evidence of this scenario having materialized at all. So diplomatic engagement is continuing through Omani mediation, but Iran's rejection of the current US proposal contradicts the de-escalatory trajectory. And Iran's activities at multiple sites were part of an undeclared structured nuclear program. So yeah, the temporary de-escalation is definitely not materializing. And scenario C is diplomatic collapse, right? So this scenario said that there would be complete collapse of diplomatic talks, and then there would be military escalation. So this scenario has not materialized because Iran has threatened countermeasures and Israel has increased military preparations, but a complete diplomatic breakdown has definitely not happened. Iran has not expelled the IAEA inspectors. It has warned, it has issued warnings, but it has not expelled anybody. And thus far, no military strikes have been conducted anywhere, despite the Israeli readiness. So, scenario A has won, like I had predicted, and scenario B and C have not materialized. Now, let's take a look at the likely future trajectory, and let's take a look at the timeline. So on day one, after the prediction, the IAEA Board of Governors meeting began as predicted, with plans to submit a resolution declaring Iran to be in non-compliance. Um, so 7 days have gone by. Now European powers are preparing, like I said, to trigger snapback sanctions, which represents the most significant potential escalation. Days 14 to 30 going forward, looking forward. Uh, Iranian sources indicate that Tehran considers an anti-Iran resolution inevitable, and it has prepared immediate countermeasures. And day 30 to 45, the JCPOA snapback mechanism would reimpose UN Security Council sanctions and restore demands for Iran to end uranium enrichment. So we are going towards a confrontation, right? It's the standoff is going towards a confrontation. So thus far, what we see is that scenario A is dominating. The evidence strongly supports that scenario A, which is intensified pressure and brinkmanship, is the dominant trajectory as of today. The coordination between IAEA censure efforts, Iranian retaliatory threats, continued diplomatic engagement, new sanctions, heightened Israeli military readiness, etc., they precisely match the predictions of scenario A, which was made 7 days ago. So the 70% probability assigned to the scenario appears to be very well calibrated given the current development. So this once again is a correct prediction. Let's take a look at prediction 3 from last week, which was about India and Pakistan. So the prediction I made last week was that India-Pakistan tensions will continue post Operation Sindoor. And this prediction examined the ongoing tensions between India and its evil neighbor following the recent operation that India conducted on Pakistan and the ongoing strategic positioning of both the nations. So, what was scenario A that I put out? Scenario A was controlled confrontation and diplomatic maneuvering, which I said would have a 65% probability. What were the elements of this scenario? There would be a precarious ceasefire. This ceasefire will hold precariously with continued minor incidents here and there. There would be strategic disengagement. India will pursue strategic disengagement as a policy, and India will accelerate its defense modernization efforts. Thirdly, the water disputes will continue. The Indus Water Treaty issues will become a more significant flashpoint as the days, weeks, months, years go by. And the US will attempt to balance its relationships with India and Pakistan, while China will start openly supporting Pakistan. So this was the prediction I made. Controlled confrontation. I gave it a 65% probability of happening. Let us see what actually happened. What has the outcome been? The outcome is that my prediction is confirmed. Controlled confirmation, a controlled confrontation. That's confirmed. 80% accuracy. Scenario B has an accuracy of 15%, and scenario C has an accuracy of about 5%. So scenario A has materialized most accurately, with key developments in defense modernization, diplomatic outreach by both nations, and escalating water disputes, confirming this predicted trajectory. Let's take a look at the details. So India's defense modernization and strategic positioning. So India's ADA, Aeronautical Development Agency, expects to finalize the production partner for the Indian fifth generation fighter plane, the AMCA, Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft, within the next 6 months. So this aircraft, which weighs about 25 tons, it's a twin-engine stealth fighter. It is designed to eventually replace the Indian Air Force's Sukhoi 30 MKI fighter jets as the backbone of India's fighter jet fleet. And this development it demonstrates India's commitment to reducing dependence on foreign military platforms while enhancing India's indigenous deterrence capabilities. So, this is in line with what I had predicted. Now, diplomatic maneuvering and international engagement. India's diplomatic mission has been a grand success. India's all party, multi party parliamentary delegation, which went to multiple countries, it secured high level meetings with US Vice President J.D. Vance and US Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau. Mr. Landau stated that I reaffirm that the US stands strong with India in the fight against terrorism. So it's a diplomatic success overall, and India's diplomatic mission has also received similar success in its visits to other countries as well. The Pakistanis also sent a delegation, not to a whole lot of countries, but just to the US apparently, and it faced a significant diplomatic setback. So this delegation, the Pakistani diplomatic delegation, was led by Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, and it faced what was described as a stinging public rebuke, and it was perceived as pleading for American weapons. So, this diplomatic outcome that has happened, the Indian success and the Pakistani setback, it validates my prediction that the US will attempt to balance its relationship while maintaining stronger ties with India. So that's about the diplomatic maneuvering. Now, water disputes. So this is an emerging flashpoint. That's what we are seeing. And Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif says that any move to block or divert water will be considered as an act of war. Well, it's something India will need to take seriously. You cannot afford to take any adversary lightly, right? So. So the suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty, which was signed in 1960, it has emerged as potentially more consequential long-term issue than the immediate military confrontation that is now a month in the past. And Pakistan, obviously, as we know, is the downstream country. India controls all the headwaters of the 5 rivers, right? And as such, Pakistan faces severe implications, with the Indus Basin, the rivers of this basin, supplying approximately 80% of Pakistan's irrigated agriculture, which is a sector that accounts for about 25% of Pakistan's GDP. And this can have catastrophic implications for Pakistan. Yeah, so this is what happens when you engage in terrorism, when you use terrorism as as an instrument of state policy. Now, the alternative scenarios that I had put forth last week. Scenario B was gradual de-escalation. Scenario C was renewed military escalation. So if you look at what's happened in the past week, the evidence provides minimal support for scenario B, gradual de-escalation. The ceasefire has generally held since May 10th, but there is absolutely no indication of substantial back-channel talks between India and Pakistan. I said it won't happen, right? And there's no evidence of tangible reduction in border developments. Absolutely not. None at all. And the continuation of the punitive measures like the Indus Waters Treaty suspension contradicts the de-escalatory trajectory. So scenario B has failed. Scenario C was renewed military escalation. We know it's not happened. This scenario has not materialized during the past 7 days. No significant trigger events, such as any kind of terrorist attack on India, and no major miscalculations that have led to any kind of substantial casualties. And the absence of any large-scale punitive strikes on Pakistan by India indicates that we are currently maintaining the ceasefire framework, the pause of warfare framework established at the end of the 10th of May. Let's take a look at the timeline and the trajectory, and let's do the conclusion. So, India's strategic disengagement approach has proven to be effective. It has allowed India to maintain pressure on Pakistan through non-military means while building long-term advantages. India has weaponized water resources through the Indus Waters Treaty suspension. This represents a particularly significant development that is going to reshape the bilateral relationship between India and Pakistan. So this is controlled confrontation, like I said 7 days ago. This approach enables India to exert continuous, gradually increasing, very subtly, very slowly, but definitely increasing day by day, week by week, month by month, etc., that kind of pressure on Pakistan's existential interests, without incurring the risk associated with a direct military confrontation. So, scenario A, has turned out to be completely true thus far. What was my fourth prediction last week? It was about AI. The prediction was that the global AI development race will accelerate. And there was particular attention on military applications and the deepening US China technological rivalry. So I said there would be a 75% probability of this escalating. Let's take a look at scenario A, which I had given, right? Scenario A had a 75% probability over 30 to 90 days, that sort of time period. What were the components of this scenario? Scenario A, first of all, US export controls. The US will further tighten export controls on AI chips targeting China. Secondly, there will be Chinese investment. China will accelerate state backed investment in domestic AI chip manufacturing and alternative computing architectures. Thirdly, there will be military AI applications that will see rapid development by US, China, Israel, and the UK. No mention of India over here, by the way. And fourthly, there will be ecosystem bifurcation, which means that major tech companies will navigate these complex geopolitical restrictions, and this will lead to distinct Western and Chinese AI ecosystems. It's a systemic bifurcation that we are going to witness. This is the scenario I had put forth. I said there will be a 75% probability of this happening over a 30 to 90-day time period. We are 7 days into that period. Let's take a look at what's actually happened. The outcome is that there is partial validation for scenario A with policy reservations, with policy reversals. So scenario A seems to have an accuracy of about 60%. If you analyze all the data points that I have collected over the past 7 days related to AI and the AI technological competition, then you see that about 60% of the data points validate scenario A to partially or fully. About 30% validation accuracy goes to scenario B, and scenario C has an accuracy of 10%. Scenario B was that there would be a slower, more fragmented AI advancement with emerging safety norms. And scenario C was that there would be unexpected technological stagnation or some kind of major AI incident which would lead to a global pause. So clearly that has not happened, which is why it has an accuracy of about 10%. Some aspects of it may be kind of happening, but there is no large scale validation of that. And scenario B seems to have a more, about a 30% hit rate when it comes to all the data points that I have examined. So now let's examine this in more detail. So what we have seen in the past week is that there is continued technological decoupling between the East and the West, between the US-led nations and the China-led nations. So Huawei the US has implemented new restrictions on Huawei Ascend chips, declaring that their use anywhere in the world is a violation of US export controls. So nobody in the world except the US can use Huawei Ascend chips. Well, there we have it. The Chinese have implemented export licensing requirements for rare earth minerals, and this has affected major US car manufacturers, automakers like General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis. And China has issued temporary 6-month export licenses to suppliers, demonstrating the strategic use of critical material access as a tool of technological competition. So we are witnessing this continued technological decoupling between the US and China. The Western AI ecosystem is in the process of consolidation. So there's a partnership emerging between the UK and NVIDIA. The UK has announced that it has announced an AI regulatory sandbox partnership with NVIDIA today. It was announced today, and it's designed to help financial firms test AI tools in a regulated environment, a sandbox environment. The Financial Conduct Authority's collaboration with NVIDIA is providing access to advanced computing capabilities and customized AI software. So there's this financial sector focus. And this initiative represents the kind of allied cooperation predicted in scenario A's ecosystem bifurcation scenario. So this bears out what I said would happen as part of scenario A. Now let's take a look at the conclusion of what really happened. So there is complex competition that's happening. The actual trajectory of US China competition, technological competition, has proven to be more complex than anticipated by scenario A. The reversal of export controls represents a significant deviation from predicted policy directions. There are alternative mechanisms at play. Technological competition is evolving through alternative mechanisms, including company specific restrictions, critical material controls, and bilateral negotiations rather than broad multilateral export framework. So it's taking a set of different mechanisms, but we are witnessing continued bifurcation, the continuation of ecosystem bifurcation through these alternative channels. It shows that technological decoupling remains a dominant trend, but it's following different pathways than originally predicted by scenario A. So overall, scenario A is still the dominant scenario, but it's not entirely coming out to be true, at least in the first 7 days. But it's a 90-day timeline scenario, so there's still time to see what happens. So those are the four scenarios of the four big predictions I had made. Three have turned out to be absolutely spot on true, and the fourth one seems to be about 60% or so true thus far in the initial days of the 90-day trajectory, of the 90-day time horizon of the prediction. So overall, I would say good job by me, right? Okay, let's take a look at what are the top evolving storylines that we need to keep an eye on over the next week and more. Yes, so five critical developments that warrant close monitoring in the coming days due to their potential for significant geopolitical impact. Firstly, the Elon Musk Donald Trump feud, which is a new geopolitical risk vector. So Musk has publicly criticized Trump. He has criticized Trump's tax policy as a disgusting abomination. Trump has threatened to cancel government contracts with Musk's companies. Musk has threatened to decommission SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft. This is incredible. This is unprecedented, like Trump would say. And this is a geopolitical risk vector for the US, and it could spill over to many other countries. This is something that's ongoing. It's evolving. It's happening as we speak right now. If you go on X, you'll see something happening. Maybe some new developments must have happened since the time I started this live stream. So it's an ongoing situation. We're going to have to keep an eye on this. The second major storyline that we have to keep an eye on is NATO has embarked on a major strategic realignment. So we discussed this some time ago at the beginning of the show. NATO defense ministers have endorsed a proposal to increase NATO countries' defense spending to 5% of their GDP. Germany has announced plans to expand its military by 60,000 troops to meet NATO targets, which is not a huge number, but it's a start maybe for Germany, for NATO. And the UK intelligence has warned of a potential Russian attack on NATO within the next 2 to 3 years. So they are building up this Russia threat, and they are using this to justify increased defense spending to 5% of GDP and expansion of in the number of troops. So we are seeing increased militarization in Europe, and this is a continuing ongoing trend. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this. More of this will most likely happen in the next week to maybe to next 3 months. Then we have the Iran nuclear standoff situation. It is now nearing its critical threshold, like I had predicted, exactly like I had predicted. So IAEA has revealed news from 2003, past Iranian nuclear weapons activities. Iran now has apparently enough fissile material for about 10 nuclear weapons. Iran has rejected a US enrichment ban proposal. And Putin has signaled his backing for Tehran's nuclear enrichment program. So we are, and there's the Israel angle. Israel is getting ready for potentially striking at Iran's nuclear enrichment sites and other facilities. So we are now fast approaching a critical threshold in this situation. Then we have to obviously keep an eye on the Ukraine conflict, because it is in the process of escalating with with strategic strikes. So we had Operation Spiderweb, which Ukraine claims destroyed or damaged up to 10% of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. Then we had a massive Russian retaliation, one of its most powerful attacks, which were launched on Kharkiv and the other cities. And at the same time, Russia simultaneously advanced into the Dnipropetrovsk region for the first time, and the Sumy offensive is also ongoing. So this situation is escalating. The Ukraine conflict situation is escalating. This is an ongoing situation. And then we have this situation, which is rather interesting. China and Russia deepen a tense alliance of convenience. So in public, there is alignment. North Korea, with clear Russian and Chinese backing, has pledged unconditional support for Russia's war, the special military operation, right, which is ongoing since 2022. Russia is now reportedly operating Chinese laser defense systems. So there is technology transfer that has happened from China to Russia, apparently. Now, the Russia-China relationship is a transactional relationship. It's a complex relationship. It's driven by shared opposition to the US-led order. It's not driven by mutual trust. Now, if you are long-time watchers of this channel, you will know that what I have said about the Russia-China relationship. Russia and China are natural adversaries. They are not natural allies. This is a temporary alliance of convenience. This is a temporary modus operandi that these two nations have agreed to for the time being. But the two nations are natural adversaries on a long-term time horizon. So there's leaked intelligence, a leaked Russian intelligence document, which has been published in the New York Times, apparently. So this document labels China as the enemy and cites concerns over China's growing influence in Central Asia, which Russia has historically seen as its exclusive sphere of influence. So there we have it. Russia and China deepen a tense alliance of convenience. And then there's the Indo-Pacific situation. So Indo-Pacific security alliances solidify against China. What all do we have in this? There's a Philippines-Japan Pact, which is a significant military access agreement, which has been ratified by the Philippines and by Japan. There is trilateral cooperation that's happening between the US, Japan, and Australia. They are intensifying their defense ties. All these nations over here, they are concerned about China. There's the US pivot to the Indo-Pacific region. The Pentagon has announced a major military shift to this region. It's kind of withdrawing to some extent from Africa and other places, and it's refocusing its resources and its energies and its focus to the Indo-Pacific region. And then there is expansion of Quad activities and cooperation, which is now extending into the space domain. The Quad nations are obviously, of course, the US, India, Australia, and Japan. Now let's take a look at some soft signals or weak signals from the past week. So these emerging developments may not be making headlines yet, but they have the potential to significantly impact global affairs in the coming months. So the early identification of these soft signals provides a strategic advantage in anticipating future challenges and opportunities. So let's take a look at a couple of soft signals to note. So we just discussed this, but let's discuss this a little more in detail. Leaked Russian intel document reveals deep suspicion and mistrust of China. So this leaked intelligence document reportedly characterizes China as the enemy, which suggests there is a significant amount of internal mistrust and tension within Russia that contradicts the public narrative of a no limits Russia-China partnership. And this signal exposes a potential critical fracture in the Russia-China strategic alignment. So while publicly cooperating to counter the Western influence, the US influence, Russia's security services may view China's expanding influence in traditional Russian spheres like Central Asia. They may see this as a long-term strategic threat to their own interests. And this underlying suspicion could probably will limit the depth of their strategic cooperation, particularly on sensitive defense technology, military technology, and intelligence sharing. And that's where the India angle also comes into a large extent. And this is something that India should certainly seek to benefit from. So that's about the Russia China situation. Now, China has this brain control warfare strategy. It's about non-military dominance. So the reports have indicated that China is pursuing a grand strategy focused on brain control warfare, which leverages economic, technological, and diplomatic means for global influence. This seems to come from Sun Tzu philosophy. It reflects Sun Tzu-based philosophy of winning without direct military conflict. And actions like the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, leadership in international standards bodies, where you can exert your influence without really being noticed or seen, and leadership in global media influence. These are all integrated components of a strategy to reshape the international order. And this is something that India consistently falls behind in, because India doesn't seem to care about these things. So this is China's brain control warfare strategy. Now, before we end, let's take a look at the most significant cross-regional patterns and systemic trends. There are three major points to note over here. Firstly, the great technological decoupling accelerates. It's accelerating. So the Russia, if you look, I have examined a very large data set of news reports over the past week, more than 1,000. So if you look at these data sets, then you will find that Russia and the US lead high impact events. Each of them has 56 high impact events, followed by the Middle East, which has 49 events, and AI, space, emerging technology, etc. All of this clubbed together has 42 high impact events. And technological conflicts dominate systemic risk with 90% rising trajectory. Secondly, you will see that regional acceleration hierarchies is seen. So India leads global acceleration. If you look at the various regions like India, Europe, Russia, China, the US, Africa, AI, space and emerging technology, finance, and so on, all of these different regions and domains, you will find that India is the region/domain that leads global escalation, with 94% of events related to India, which are rising in escalation or rising trajectory. This is followed by Asia Pacific and the Asia Pacific destabilization, with 93% events showing a rising trajectory, and European stabilization shows 82% rising trajectory. So it's kind of lagging behind. And you find that there is multi-domain actor convergence. So critical actors operating across multiple domains include Iran, which is operating across 4 domains, and there are 64 such events. Then there is Ukraine, which is operating across 5 domains with 101 events. Then NATO, which is operating across 6 domains with 17 events, and Israel, which is operating across 5 domains and 47 events. So there are these actors that are participating or present in multiple domains at the same time. So there is a lot of cross connections that you see and systemic trends that you see in all the data points that I have examined, very high signal, high and low noise data points that I have examined over the past 7 days. So to conclude this weekly intelligence briefing, what we see is that the global system is experiencing unprecedented synchronous escalation across multiple domains, with 85% of events out of more than 1,000 events showing rising trajectories. We are at a technological inflection point. The US-China technological competition has reached a critical inflection point, and traditional security assumptions are being systematically challenged, and critical developments are there. Immediate attention is required for 87 critical developments, some of which we have discussed today, which are primarily centered on technological transfer, technology transfer restrictions, and supply chain disruptions. So beyond all the geopolitical, geostrategic things that are escalations and critical events that are happening, there is this undercurrent, this slightly less visible competition that's happening, which is the technological war that's happening. The war for AI, the war for technology, the war for semiconductors, the war for rare earth minerals, the supply chains, all of that put together is the technological war that's going on. And that is the actual critical war of our time. So that's about it for this week. I hope that you found this valuable. I hope that it gave you some orientation as to what is happening in the world right now. So if this gave you some value, please give it a like, please subscribe, and please share it with your friends. And if you have questions, I will take your questions very briefly in the Ask Abhijit live stream that will begin at 9:15 p.m. Indian time, and I will hopefully see you over there. And there'll be the next Geostrategy live stream will happen on Thursday, and the Indian Interest live stream will happen on Friday. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to taking your questions in the Ask Abhijit live stream, which will begin in a few minutes from now. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye bye.